Greetings viewers, Eric the Car Guy here, also known as ETCG1 when I post videos to this channel. We start our videos with, if it is your birthday, happy birthday. I like to do that, so I'm going to keep doing it. In today's installment, I thought I would do a couple of things. This may very well be my last ETCG1 post of 2017. No worries, I have every intention of being back in 2018, which is really just a couple of weeks away. That said, what I hope to do in this installment is, one, give you a Fairmont update. I realized I hadn't done that in a while. In fact, this year was the year that it started up. It ran, it got on the road. And it's been a couple of months since I've done that, and I've had to do little tweaks and tunes and things like that to get it to where it is now. I also thought that I might take the opportunity to respond to some of the comments that some of you made to my traction versus power video that came out recently. A lot of you brought up some good points. Some of you expressed some concerns. I thought I'd answer to those things. And it's kind of cold in the shop today. Some of you might look at that last clip and say the obvious, like, Eric, why don't you have the heat on? Because this. That's why. It's kind of hard to talk with the heater on. But it's a good heater. I just turn it off when I shoot. All right, well, what have I done in the Fairmont? Well, several things, actually. But my biggest issue that keeps coming back, and I've mentioned this in the past, is the seal of the exhaust manifold to the cylinder head. I've had all kinds of problems there. I'm making an ongoing video about solving the problem. Now, I seem to have gotten the driver's side pretty much nailed down, and the problem, well, initially was that I kept blowing the gaskets out. So I got the best gaskets I could find. There were these copper gaskets. I installed those blew out also. Before I did that, I also got myself a belt sander and made sure that the manifolds themselves were straight and true. However, I screwed up. I made the manifold straight and true on one axis. However, particularly on the passenger side, which is where I'm having the problem now, what happened was, as I was holding it on the belt sander, I wasn't holding it all the ways level. Sometimes I'd be one side, sometimes I'd be on the other, so I have a straight and true axis long ways, but when it comes to the horizontal the other way, it's a little side to side. So I'm gonna go back in today with my welder and weld in some areas, grind it down, try to create myself a new sealing surface. But one thing I got from people that I talked to that run turbos was that they prefer not to run exhaust gaskets at all, which I thought was a little strange. However, I did exactly that on this side and just used copper RTV, which I'll show you here in a second, and sealed it up, and it's sealed. The other side, not so much, mainly because of the reason that I mentioned. So I intend to try and fix that today. Once I get that sorted, then I will have a sealed exhaust, which is something that annoys me to no end, because the purpose of this car in my mind, and this is where a lot of people I think are confused, the purpose of this car in my mind is to be a sleeper. Why did I take it to the drag strip? I took it to the drag strip to see what kind of quarter-mile time I could get from it. That is not the goal of this car. This car is not meant to be a drag racing car. It's also not necessarily meant to be a road racing car. It's meant to be a cool car that I wanted to make, that I drive on the street, that is a sleeper. So in other words, it's a surprise to the people that come across it. They might not think much of it, and that's kind of what I'm going for. And then when I open it up and they're like, whoa, hey, what's up with that? Where this car really excels and what makes me so happy is when I go out on runs on this road 42 that's right by the shop, and I'm just cruising along this, for lack of a better word, it's a backcountry road between here, Mason and Lebanon, Ohio. And I don't have to drive fast, but I just love how the car hugs the road. I love how I can just touch the gas and I can instantly be going faster. It feels really sweet and really awesome on those backcountry roads. That is its intention. Okay, this is real world startup here on a very cold day. Oh yeah, that's the other thing. The slow cranking is due to my starter solenoid. I have one on order, I'm gonna replace it, but you know, I know that that's where the voltage is dropping through there, so it does crank slow sometimes. That's because the starter solenoid's worn out, needs to be replaced. So that's another thing, but that's minor. You know, those are 12 bucks, you can find them anywhere. It always does that, no choke. You can really hear that exhaust leak. This side is fine. This side, not so much. Right here is another exhaust leak. And this is the second exhaust cutout I've installed. I had an original exhaust cutout. It was a different style. It was a Doug's. It had a blade that sort of moved back and forth to obstruct and open up the exhaust cutout. All right, here's the original exhaust cutout. As you can see, it kissed the ground a little bit. That bent everything up on the inside, and I had to go back in and rebend everything and get it all repositioned so that it would actually work again. I was successful in doing this. There's the other side of it. I was successful in doing this. However, it rattles. And other people that have had these exhaust cutouts say the same thing, rattle, rattle, rattle. So the trade-off is, I guess, this style, which is a butterfly. It's kind of like a throttle body. So it opens and closes like a throttle body opens and closes. The thing is, it doesn't seal completely. In fact, when the engine's running, I can put my hand over this and you can hear the difference. You can actually see the exhaust coming out, but hear the difference. So this will leak. At least mine does. This here is my new muffler. It's way bigger than my old muffler, and that means it's quieter. The old muffler wasn't bad. It was the one that the exhaust shop installed. It worked okay. I was hoping for quieter, but it wasn't. This is what happened. So I'm at the drag strip, same place I wasn't getting traction on that same day, and on the second run, I was all the way at the big end of the track, decelerating, I was slowing down, I was done with my run, and I had a really big backfire. Well, the problem was on my second run, I forgot to open my exhaust cutout. Don't ask me why, I just didn't leave it open while I was at the track. Anyway, had a backfire, it literally completely exploded the muffler. So I had to replace it, but this time I did what I wanted to do the entire time, which was put a flange in here. So I flanged the back of this muffler, and I also flanged the pipe going up to the back here. This way I can remove this entire section up to here. So all this comes out. So if I ever go to do a clutch or something, or if I need to take the transmission out, which I do when I pull the engine out, it's an easy prospect. I just pull this section of exhaust out, boom, we're done. It's still held up in here real nice, but exhaust is something I've been fighting with a lot since I got this thing running, and mainly it's those exhaust leaks at the manifold that are the biggest problem. Here's my fuel system. I got a Holley blue fuel pump here, and I've got this fuel filter, and actually this kind of comes around the spare tire well. This is just a screen type fuel filter, and then it goes up there to the fuel tank. Now, I like this setup, except I'm running into some issues, and I think fuel delivery is a problem. Initially, what I thought was, as you may be able to see up in here above this exhaust, there was, I've got a bend in the fuel line, and I've got some exhaust wrap over the top of it to try to keep some heat off of this. I was sort of getting, I don't want to call it a vapor lock, but I was going kind of lean, and I was trying to figure it out. And I figured out, because where this fuel line used to run, it used to run a lot closer to the exhaust. I never intended for the exhaust to be on this side. I thought it was going to be on the passenger side. Hence the reason I ran the fuel line and everything down on the driver's side. So that's why that worked out that way. But as a result, now I've got hot exhaust that's close to the fuel. And I think what was happening for a little bit is I was boiling that fuel inside the fuel line before it ever got to the front to the engine. So that was a problem for a bit. Also, I'm forever adjusting the carburetor. And before some of you say fuel injection, and I've thought about it, fuel injection would be way easier to tune with this thing. We're going to talk a little bit about the cost of what that would be. But that being said, I do have a regret with the fuel system, and that is not, even with my carburetor, going with a return type of system to maintain consistent fuel pressure. I want to get this thing on a chassis dyno so I can actually look at the fuel pressure to see what it's doing when it's running at full throttle, to see if it's actually getting the fuel that it should be getting, because I don't think that it is. And I think part of the reason for that is that I'm not running a return system, and I'm not sure if this fuel pump is enough. It's rated that it's supposed to be able to handle up to what I'm running here with, roughly 500 horsepower. And those numbers on a dyno, I got 575 horsepower and 622 pound-feet of torque on the dyno. That was on not necessarily a good day, and that was like one of maybe 2 good runs we had. We never got a chance to tune this engine. And I have a feeling that this engine makes more power than that, because also that was only at 7.8 psi of boost. I've sort of set the whole system up to go up as high as 12, and that's about where I'm going to max out. I don't need to run a high boost. And in fact, I think it's better to run a low boost with a good flowing engine rather than going high boost, because what my engine builder said has stuck with me ever since he said it. He says boost is just a measure of a restriction of the intake. So that makes total sense to me. Why not help the engine and give it more air without overstuffing it? In other words, I still want it to be reliable. And that's more than enough power. Some of you are saying, oh, that's not a lot of power by today's standards. Sure, there's 1,500, 2,000 horsepower drag cars that are out there, all that kind of stuff. You know, Lamborghini makes about what this one makes. And that should tell you something. Now, it's a very light car, it's geared to be a race car, and you know, that car is worlds away from what my Fairmont is. But that being said, don't disrespect the Fairmont because it doesn't make enough power. It's a street car, okay? It's not a full-on race car or anything like that. You know, over 500 horsepower, which there may potentially be that at the wheels. You know, by the time I actually get this thing dialed in, I could have over 600 horsepower, which is kind of what I was shooting for. If that's the case, and there's actually 500 at the wheels, you know, don't knock that. Tires. Now that came up in the traction video, and I've been doing some thinking, and I was actually doing some thinking around the time that I shot that video. And many of you mentioned that drag radials may not necessarily be the way to go. In fact, it's not the way to go with a manual transmission vehicle. And the research I've done supports that. A better option would be to go with bias ply slicks as opposed to that. They have a lot more flex, absorb the shock of shifting a standard transmission a lot better. A lot of you commented on my shifting and everything also. Yes, I could use some work there, but you know, as far as feathering the gas pedal and all that kind of stuff, I didn't have the gas pedal to the floor the whole time. It might have gone down initially, but ever since that first time, I was feathering the pedal trying to get the thing to stay on the road. So I wasn't mashing the pedal to the floor the whole time, and I still got that squirreliness. So yes, I do need to work on my driving technique, but I was having a serious problem with traction. And there were a couple of cars that went down before me that had oil leaks, that stuff, type of thing. They cleaned up the track the best they could. It's cold track, cold tires. These tires, I'm starting to think maybe too old. You know, so there's a lot going on there. The other thing, a lot of you disagreed with me rolling the fender to accommodate larger tires back here. Let me show you something. Check this out. Yeah, that's right. Front fenders are already rolled and you didn't even see it. And the reason I did that is to get these wheels, because when this is on the ground, there's not a whole lot of clearance here. The only way I was able to get clearance is to roll those up in there pretty good. So, if you don't like rolled fenders because you're worried about it ruining the look, that's a rolled fender that you're looking at right there. A couple of you actually caught this on the last video, and that's the damage on this tire. You can see that along the inside edge. That is a result of the inner part of the tire coming into contact with the fender. As you can see here, I've got the rear wheel off, and you can sort of get a feel for what's happening. Part of it is I'm going to need to come in here and adjust my pan hard bar a little bit, because that's what locates this entire axle assembly in the back here. I need to tweak on that a little bit more. As this car drives down the road, it leans to one side or the other, and then the axle stays in place. And because of that, that's when the tire is coming into contact here. I can hear it sometimes when I do hard cornering. So I need to sort that out. That'll probably involve me, well, clearancing this area on both sides, because there is a little bit on the other side also. So as far as any wider tires going inward, that's not going to happen. So this whole rolling fender thing has got to happen to get any kind of real tire back here. Here's another recurring issue, and that is this perpetually leaking oil filter divorced housing, whatever you want to call it. As you can see, there's oil on the outside of the filter. I had another filter on here. I thought, what the heck, that's the first thing I'll try. I changed the filter. I still have this issue, and it's pretty much putting oil all the way back. It's got to be something with this mating surface. It's just not working out. I got another housing for the oil filter, but it's not this type of oil filter. The more I look at this, the more I think what I might end up doing is not putting the oil filter here so much. It may end up back here, up underneath where the steering column goes through, because that seems to be the easiest place to do that. There's no exhaust or anything back here because it all goes forward because of the turbo. Oh yeah, and that's another thing with this exhaust. I have to once again come in here and make more clearance between the stabilizer bar and the exhaust. This has been something that's been ongoing. It was better before I did the belt sander. It got worse after. In fact, I had to redo this entire pipe from here over to here. I put a sleeve in here to make the pipe a little bit longer. There's actually a pie cut that I took here so I could bend this thing back far enough to where I could get it to clear the stabilizer bar. But since I'm not running gaskets, those few thousandths of an inch are now making contact in there. And now I can feel it vibrated idle, all that kind of thing. Not cool. So what I got to do is go back in and do the same thing over. So I'm going to take this piece of pipe off again, put another cut here, put another pie piece of metal in here, get another sleeve for over here so I can make this a little bit longer. But I'm going to angle this whole thing so it's back in a way, hopefully really far away from this stabilizer bar so that it can have the clearance it needs. It feels so wrong saying this, but I think I need to raise the car up another inch. And I think that will help with that tire clearance in the back that I was telling you about before, but also just help it in general as far as, you know, how it steers, how it maneuvers, all of that. I like it low like this. I think this is a really good stance. However, it's, you know, with those clearance issues, it being up a little bit higher is probably going to do nothing but benefit. But that's something else I need to do. Also, I've never done a proper alignment on this car yet. I just sort of eyeballed it. And I'm glad I did because the suspension has settled. In fact, the rear has gone down since I've been driving it. So I need to reset that. But part of the thing that's been holding me back this whole time is I need to find ballast equal to my weight to put in the vehicle when I do that alignment so that I can do it quote unquote properly. The cooling fans, the extra cooling fans, these 4000 CFM cooling fans, seem to be doing the trick. I mean, this thing doesn't go above 200 degrees and this controller works. It's kind of cool how the controller works, which is actually sandwiched in there. It's also a Durrell controller, stuff I got from Summit Racing. Anyway, I had to modify this fan shroud to get this to fit, and I knew I would have to do that because it was too big, but I thought I did a pretty good job because this corner used to come out over here, haha, and you may or may not have noticed that. Anyway, that seems to have solved that problem, and the way it's set up is cool because only one fan comes on initially at the temperature I have it set at, which is about 180. Then if it goes 15 degrees hotter, the second fan kicks on, and then, you know, it is cooling then. But I managed to solve that. The heat shields have helped tremendously. I've got one on the alternator now, as you can probably see there. So all my heat shielding, and then the one back here, has really done a great job at keeping heat off of things. I also put heat shielding on my exhaust, my wires that go close to the exhaust there. So all that stuff has really helped. Turbos make lots of heat. And if you're running a turbo, get everything away from it, and anything that's close to it, heat shield the crap out of it. That I can say for sure. But I'm really proud of, speaking of my fan, it's all one connector. That connector right there. That has both fans and the temperature sensor in it. So all I have to do to remove this is disconnect this one electrical connector and disconnect the hoses and these two clamps, and this whole assembly comes out. I thought that was pretty trick. Isn't really much else under the hood that I'm having issues with right now, which I'm grateful for, but gosh darn it, those exhaust leaks are really bugging me. Put my 5-point racing harness in just when I went to the track. I thought that would be kind of cool. I've got another one for the other side. I haven't put it in yet. Eventually what I hope to do is get a racing seat for this so I can remove this seat and the back seat and put it into a quote-unquote race mode. I've also installed a fire extinguisher back here, which is a lot better than the one I had rolling around on the floor. I got this one from Bleep and Jeep, the quick disconnect for it. It's really kind of a neat setup. I'll link it in the description so you can check it out. I can't say enough good things about my dash and how the interior and all this worked out. Some of you say my shifter is too long. Yeah, kind of, maybe, but I don't mind it. Like I said, I'm driving this on the road and it's actually really comfy to drive. And if you're wondering what this is, it's where I can put my cell phone. It's a magnet. Here's my fuel cell, my battery. One thing that, and yes, I still need to put in my remote battery switch back here, which I will get to. I'm just driving it for now. But one problem that cropped up that I was not expecting, this is the vent for the fuel tank. And it needs to be just as large as the outlet, which is over here. So these are Dash 8 fittings and Dash 8 hose and all that other stuff is in that size. At the base of that is a rollover valve, which does its job. You know, but it's a really simple device. It's basically a metal ball that sits inside a chamber, and if the vehicle were ever to roll over, that metal ball would roll forward and block off any flow out of here. Problem is, when I take a hard corner, and this fuel tank does have baffles in it, you can probably see the weld marks inside here. So the fuel cell does have provisions for baffles on the inside. But when you take a hard turn, what happens is some of the fuel goes out this hose, and my vent is actually inside of there, as you can see. But then it comes running out the side of the car. How am I going to fix this? Well, my thought was I'm going to raise this up a bit and sort of put like a little S bend in it. In fact, I'm going to put another one of these 90s going in the opposite direction, going this way, and then I'll put another 90 coming back in the opposite direction and then go down. It's up about as high as the inlet, which is where it should be. Oh, and yes, I did make room for fuel injection if I ever wanted to go there. It's that little black cap, that can be where the return would go. Anyway, back to this. So in other words, put sort of a little S shape. So bend it this way and then bend this way and then out to be the vent. That way it can still work as a vent. Can't put any check valves or anything in there because then the fumes won't go away, and that's what you need. So that's another issue I need to address. Speaking of fuel injection, let's talk about that. The thought has crossed my mind more than once, and it did cross my mind at the onset. But here's the thing that a lot of you seem to be leaving out. It's the expense. In order to get a blow-through system, so in other words, it has to be like one of those throttle body fuel injection kits that bolts on. There's only one that I found that really is set up for blow-through, and that runs about $2,000. It was from Fast Fuel Injection. It's a good system, without a doubt. But then I also need to purchase a fuel pump to provide the proper amount of pressure, and then I need to modify the fuel system. As you said, as you saw, the fuel cell is already set up for the return going back to it, which I could also use for a carbureted system, which I may switch over to that. New fuel pump, different fuel pressure regulator with a return, and that way I'm sort of set up for fuel injection at some point in the future. Because I will admit, carburetors are a pain in the butt to tune. The carburetor, that was, $700 as opposed to the $2,000 I mentioned, not to mention the fuel pump and the rest of the upgrades to the fuel system. So that's an expense that has to be considered. I mean, it turned out to be a way more expensive car than I initially intended it to be as it is. So adding more expense to that, Although, as I said at the beginning of this video, cars like this are a work in progress until the day you sell them. You'll always be invested. You'll always be working on them in some way. So a lot of the Fairmont project, I'm hoping, for those of you that have always thought about building a car like this or thinking about building a car like this, I'm falling on my sword so you don't have to. I do that a lot in my videos. I leave the mistakes in. And I do this so that you can see that, hey, this could happen. And this way you can avoid it. So in other words, I'm making these mistakes so you don't necessarily have to. And the Fairmont project is a huge part of that. So if you've learned anything from this whole experience that I've had with this car, it's that it's going to be way more expensive than you think. It's going to take way more time than you think. Just imagine if I'd done real body work to this car, how much more money I'd have invested, and I'd still be working on it now. It would not be done. I did do a little bit of body work, as you'll see, when I installed the HVAC system, but outside of that, As far as fuel injection, I wanted to address that because a lot of people have brought it up. It's a valid point, yes, but it was always an expense that I was hoping to spare at the onset. But as far as drivability, as far as tunability, you really can't beat fuel injection. Although, right now I'm going to try to make the carburetor work. If I can't, I'm hoping to have a return system set up to where if and when I do switch over to fuel injection, that we can just, go to town with it. But for now, it's actually a pretty cool driver, the way it gets around. And that's what I wanted it to be. I mean, it gives me joy to drive it. So give me that. Please give me that. Stop talking about everything I did wrong. With that tone. All right. A lot of you bring up some really good points. Those tires, for example. A lot of you brought that up in a very, hey dude, those are not, the drag radials are not what you want. You want bias ply slicks. Okay. That's, I can take that. Constructive criticism, fine. But this whole BS, you spent all that money on the car, it's a turd, it goes slow. No, that's not how this works. I don't want to talk to you. But the rest of you that have real input, I'm kind of reaching out to you now to find out what you can offer. As I continue to say during this video, the Fairmont is a work in progress, and I have a feeling it always will be. Now, here's something else I misspoke about in the traction video. The Power Tour is basically a car show that travels around from place to place. I was mistaken when I said that that's what I wanted to do, and that involved driving from drag strip to drag strip. That is Drag Week. It's just something that's a completely separate event. Wouldn't it be cool if I could do both? The idea now is to get the car going as best I can, and then start taking it places. Start doing things like drag week or the power tour, or some things that my friends were thinking about doing, car shows, all that kind of thing. Basically get the Pheromone out there so that you can get your eyeballs on it and see what it is for real. It's one thing to watch it in videos, it's another thing to see in person. And I think you get sort of well, at least for me, I get a certain feeling from the car, a certain vibe that I've always liked, and some people are very attracted to it. In fact, I had one guy follow me down the highway for miles and miles just so he could roll up next to me and tell me that he wanted me to go to one of these local car shows that he thought it would be really cool at. So some people are very affected by the car and they really love it. Other people not so much, but you know, that's how it is with these things. So I'm sorry I misspoke about the drag week and power tour thing. I'll put links to both of those in the description and we'll sort of take things from there. But first things first, you've got to start with that exhaust leak. Got to get that fixed up. And some of you pointed out that my air fuel ratios at wide open throttle seemed kind of lean when I was at the drag strip. I agree, but that was really the first time that I'd had it out to do that. In fact, I did that whole thing on a whim. I just looked to see when the race park would be open again. It was Edgewater Race Park, by the way. And it said it would be open that weekend. So I said, you know what? I'm going to drive out there and just see. And that's what I did. So didn't bring really any video equipment other than my GoPro, as you saw. I just kind of wanted to see what the car would do, see what I was dealing with. And I learned a lot. And that's the way this works. I mean, I may start slow, but I'm 4 seconds faster than the car was originally. That's something, but I still have a little ways to go. Well, we've got a plan for that, and I've talked about some of those plans in this video. If you have suggestions or if you have ideas outside of that, I'm perfectly willing to hear you out, because, you know, this has been in many ways a collaborative effort, and some of you have offered some very good advice, and I'm very appreciative of that, and thanks. And some of you, well, you're jealous, whatever, I don't know. You just got your own issues, just whatever. Anyway. So I welcome your thoughts on all of that, and I hope this update was informative to you, and I hope you enjoyed the 2017 ETCG1 season. I enjoyed making it. I enjoyed bringing these videos to you. I had a lot of fun. So right now I kind of want to get the heat turned back on. So I'm going to close this video out. If you have questions concerning this video, please check the description. I always put additional information in the description, so check there if you got questions about a video. If you have automotive questions, such as how to fix my car, that kind of thing, I ask you head over to ericthecarguide.com, also linked in the description. I'll also link my Eric the Car Guide channel if you want to see repair type videos, as opposed to these me just talking about stuff. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Be safe, have fun, stay dirty. I'll see you next time.